All right, the NFL offseason, it is hot. It is cooking, as are the storylines. And Pearce, Dietrich, Geoff Ulrich here to answer some award-winning questions. It's NFL spin move, so we're going to put a DFS and Sportsbook spin on some of the latest NFL news. First bit of news last week, how about the Raiders here, guys, extending Hunter Renfrow, 2 years at $32 million. Had his first career 1,000-yard season, added 9 touchdowns. He was Derek Carr's favorite target. However, Davante Adams now in town. So, Geoff, how much will that eat into Renfrow's fantasy potential next year?
Yeah, just a touch, just a
tiny wee bit.
I think here. There's no way Hunter Renfrow's getting 9 touchdowns this year. I feel very confident in saying that. That's going to be, I think, the biggest thing with Davante Adams there being such a good red zone target. The 1,000-yard season is interesting. I mean, he could push for 1,000 yards again. It's Josh McDaniels. Let's not forget. It's the guy who brought Julian Edelman and Wes Welker to fame in his offenses. So I think that Renfrow is still going to be a big part of this offense. I just think that you've got to play the fact that, like, Davante Adams is obviously just going to be a target hog, probably 150 plus again. So Hunter Renfrow's target's going to go down a little bit. I definitely think his touchdown is ripe for some huge regression, but you know, the yardage and receptions will still be okay. It's just not going to be quite what it was last year. So look for just slightly below average, below yardage and reception versus what we got last year. And then again, I think you're going to see more in like the 4 to 5 touchdown range for Hunter Renfrow.
Okay, Pearce, how close do you expect Renfrow to come to these numbers, that career year he had last year?
Not very close. From a season-long perspective, I don't think you can roster the guy. I mean, you can take him in late-round picks, but DFS-wise, it'll be a week-to-week situation. Maybe there's a specific matchup where the other opponent specifically suits his playing style and he can get a lot of underneath routes, or they got a lockdown corner that's going to be focused on Davante Adams. Maybe that will open him up. But for most weeks, it's just not going to happen. He's not going to get 120 targets. He's not going to get these touchdowns. And if he does get that many targets and that many touchdowns, then there's probably a problem with this offense. Either Adams is injured or there is a serious issue. And if there's serious issues in this offense where he's getting 120 targets, it's probably not a good thing to be rostering Hunter Renfrow. Maybe the AFC West turns into a shootout division. There's some pretty good offenses there, but there's also some pretty good defenses. Long story short, there's no way that he gets close to this number again.
All right, Pearce, how big of a fantasy boost are you giving Mac Jones right now, following all of these reports coming out of camp that says he has gained a better grip on the offense? His deep balls have greatly improved.
I would expect just about everything to improve. He'll be better at throwing deep passes. He'll be better at throwing intermediate passes. He should have a better grasp of the offense and just the NFL in general. All that's going to happen as he gains more years and more experience. But even with that being said, it doesn't mean that he's going to be DFS relevant. So what we're looking for is a team that scores a lot of points. It's not really the Patriots right now. We want a high-powered, through-the-air offense. That's also not the Patriots. We also want mobile quarterbacks in DFS. That's not Mac Jones. He doesn't really check the boxes that we need checked. Is he going to be better this year? Yeah, but is he going to be DFS relevant? I don't think so. I mean, just look in the red zone. At the very least, we want Mac Jones to toss the ball around in the red zone. He ranked just 14th in pass attempts in the red zone. Tom Brady, Josh Allen, 50 more pass attempts in the red zone. I just don't know what world you have to live in to consider Mac Jones over those elite options.
I mean, Geoff, Belichick's going to protect Jones while he blossoms here. Made the Pro Bowl. Teammates are talking about his intangibles.
It's all for nice storylines. And I mean, if you're a Patriots fan, you got to enjoy hearing it. But like, the Patriots are going to be what they have been, what they were last year. They drafted another running back. That's pretty much all you need to know. They already had Damian Harris, Ramondre Stevenson, and they actually drafted another running back. This team wants to run the ball. They want to make the game as ugly as possible, as Pearce alluded to. They do not want to throw the ball in the red zone. They got Devontae Parker. I don't even know why they got him. I don't even think they'll need him because he's probably going to get like 70 targets. Mac Jones being better is fine. And look, obviously we're a daily fantasy site. There maybe are matchups here where, you come in the year and Mac Jones and Devontae Parker will end up as like a nice contrarian stack, but you do not want to go down that route very often. You do not want to be chasing Mac Jones all year in DFS, and you certainly don't want to be starting him in season long. It's just going to lead to disappointment. The volume's not going to be there. This is not the kind of team that's fantasy friendly. I'm not even sure who or what Patriot I would necessarily be targeting this year. I mean, the backfield is a mess. Parker gets injured all the time anyways.
Yep.
Jacoby Myers, maybe? I don't know. I just like the Patriots are a team for fantasy purposes. we're just not going to need to talk much about. We will because they're in Boston. But
Yeah,
they're also on a ton of showdown slates too. So
yeah,
that's true.
I mean, you've got
Showdown.
like the Adam.
I always forgot about the showdown.
You've got the Adam Kaufmans and the Brendan Glashines of the world just gushing over Mac Jones. Meanwhile, the Colts media just can't stop talking about Matt Ryan, and since he's been a Colt for like a week, the Colts, by the way, falling short of a playoff spot last season because of America's team, the Jacksonville Jaguars, destroying them in Week 18. So many expect him to be a playoff contender again this year, Pearce. Obviously, there's Jonathan Taylor. What's the fantasy value for a rejuvenated Matt Ryan?
I think the first thing we should do is go back through those beat writers and see what they said about Carson Wentz. Were they gushing over him?
Yeah, it's true.
If that's the case, then we may want to take this with a grain of salt. Matt Ryan's going to be fine. They'll play well. It's an upgrade over Carson Wentz. I don't know if it's a massive upgrade just based on the system that we expect from the Colts. There's going to be weeks, where he's cheap and the matchup's going to be right, but we're looking for a specific matchup. If it's just a bad defense, then it's probably going to be a Jonathan Taylor week. You know what? Old man Matt Ryan really slinging the ball around up a touchdown or 10 points in the third and fourth quarter, just feed the ball to Jonathan Taylor. So we kind of need it to be a bad matchup or just a team that struggles against the pass and is good against the run. So there's only going to be very few weeks. And I also don't really trust this wide receiver core. And then we talked about this with the Patriots in terms of game script. The Patriots just want to run the ball. The Colts, if they do get ahead, they're just going to run the ball. I have a hard time imagining that Matt Ryan is going to have an amazing season. In the end of the year, he'll have good numbers, but I don't expect him to be a top 5 quarterback every single week at all.
All right, Geoff, working with, Frank Wright, who's known to get the most out of his quarterbacks unless it's Carson Wentz. And then, he has a dangerous supporting cast there, too, in Indy. Let's not forget, Michael Pittman there. So some consider Ryan undervalued.
Look, I mean, at this point in the year, every quarterback, Geno Smith is in the running for MVP conversation if we're listening to the beat writers right now. So, I mean, I maybe go out and bet Geno Smith. Don't actually do that. But, I mean, take everything with a grain of salt. I do think that, Matt Ryan is going to have, if we're comparing him to the last example, Mac Jones, I actually think Matt Ryan is a little bit more interesting for the simple fact, look at what Carson Wentz did behind it this O-line last year. I mean, he actually was okay. I mean, he threw 27 touchdowns. His interception rate went down. Matt Ryan in a clean pocket in his career has been good. And I love Michael Pittman as a player and just as a receiver. So I think that combo is going to be very good and potentially one you can target in DFS. But it's a lot of the same story. Do you want to be is this the combo that you want to live and die with every year? No. The Colts are a good team. They're a run-first team, and they also have a pretty good defense. It's just going to lead to a lot of boring weeks, unfortunately, where it's just Jonathan Taylor gets 150 yards. The Colts win 24-17 or something. Matt Ryan throws 200 yards. So Matt Ryan's fantasy relevance isn't going to be that good. Could he be more efficient than Carson Wentz for the Colts? Yeah, absolutely. I think he will be an upgrade for them. And I think it's going to work out nicely for them. But I'm not expecting gangbusters here. I'm not expecting a 40 touchdown season. So Matt Ryan is going to have some relevancy some weeks in DFS, but for season long, maybe as a backup or something.
All right, well, some other big news with quarterbacks around the league here, guys. You got executives and reports that say Jimmy Garoppolo and Baker Mayfield are likely going to be released, so every team knows that those players are going to be available then, which probably gives them no leverage in trade discussions. Both have been excused from their current mini camps. Geoff, is a release for both these guys the most likely outcome in your eyes?
Yeah, and look, kudos to every other team in the NFL for not taking the bait and taking on these contracts. These are ridiculous. You don't need to take these quarterbacks. I think finally, the Carolinas and the Bears and all these other teams and the Seahawks, they just finally realize it's we're not really upgrading here. If they're on the open market, sure, we'll bring them in, but we ain't taking the 18 mils. Sorry, San Francisco and Cleveland. So these guys are getting released, in my opinion, because there's just no other option out there. Carolina's tried to make it work, tried to maybe just take a little bit of money, but Cleveland's still obviously asking for teams to take a big portion of that salary. I think you'll see both these players released and very soon. I think that Baker Mayfield has a great chance to end up in Carolina. Matt Rule, his job is just under fire.
Yep.
He's tied himself to Sam Darnold. He needs another person in there. Pete Carroll. The Seahawks have been linked to these guys too, but I don't know, man. Pete Carroll just doesn't have that same job security issue, it seems like. And he just seems fine rolling with whoever he wants. So I think that Carolina is very likely to pick up one of these two guys. I think Baker being the more likely. I'm not sure about Garoppolo. Garoppolo with the injury issues could be like a longer term thing, but I think Baker gets scooped up quickly, and I think Carolina is a very likely destination.
Man, could you imagine Pearce, like Garoppolo being released and then maybe Seattle like scooping him up? Ooh.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is, like, you're going to have a guy in Subway commercials who doesn't even have a job. That's kind of interesting, right? I don't even know if most people know who Jimmy Garoppolo is in those Subway commercials. They've got to go out of the way and say, Jimmy Garoppolo, he's a quarterback or something in those commercials so people know. People are definitely not going to know who he is soon because I don't see him going anywhere. If you release him, we talked about Seattle being a possible destination for these released quarterbacks, which I predicted months ago that they weren't going to trade, that Pete Carroll was going to win this staring match, and the Browns and San Francisco were ultimately going to have to just drop these guys. And so now he has the choice between two solid quarterbacks, but why take Jimmy Garoppolo? I mean, he struggles to throw those outside passes, struggles to throw deep balls, and that's what you want with DK Metcalf. That's what you want with Tyler Lockett. So Jimmy Garoppolo really doesn't fit that system. He's also not very mobile. I think the easiest transition from Russell Wilson at his prime to another quarterback similar, if not Geno Smith, is going to be Baker Mayfield, who is slightly still mobile, I think. He's a young quarterback. And it depends on what the shoulder situation is. Is he fully recovered from his injuries? If so, then he could probably still throw the deep ball, and he would be a suitable target there. Another, wrench we can throw in here is, why would the Browns drop him now? They've got a bunch of other issues going on that it doesn't make any sense. They're not going to save any money. The only thing they're going to do is do someone a favor by releasing him now and allowing him to go work out with another team. What if that happens to be a division rival? Like, there's just no point now for the 49ers or Cleveland to release him at the moment. I would wait and just let them sweat it out as long as possible.
All right, guys, I have one more for you. We have a bonus question. So DraftKings Sportsbook, as you know, has lines up for all the regular season games in the NFL. I'm not asking you right now to pick any specific games, but overall, Geoff, this is for you too. What advantages could you gain by betting on a Week 15 game in June?
Well, I mean, if you're obviously you're going to do this, you think a team is extremely undervalued at the moment. So take Pearce's Detroit Lions, who he obviously thinks is going to be a Super Bowl team next year. You look at the lines; they're underdogs in most of the games. You say, well, I mean, if I can get them at like plus 300 versus the Packers late in the year, and I think this team is going to the Super Bowl, maybe I should lay down some money now. Now, that's not exactly, obviously looking ahead to Week 15, you don't want to do that. But we're taking the Lions as an example, team I actually like, maybe to finish 500 next year. They are playing the Seahawks, who are starting Geno Smith in Week 4. Detroit only minus 120 at home on the money line versus the Seahawks. That actually feels like maybe a good investment to make early on. So those are the kind of lines you want to look at, teams that you think are undervalued in the market right now. And by the time we get to these games in Week 4, Week 5, the lines have moved to where they're way shorter in the odds, but it's not necessarily a route you have to go down. You can still bet futures like division odds and conference championships and things like that. So
Pearce, less than a minute to go, so not a whole lot of time to talk about a Detroit-Jacksonville Super Bowl.
There isn't an advantage. Anything that you think 6 months down the road, the sportsbook probably knows that already. And Geoff's point at the end there was what you need to know. Like, hey, there's other bets out there. There's bets for actually today and for tomorrow where you can bet your money and win money today or tomorrow and not have it tied up for 6 months. So bet some baseball or some hockey or some NBA or NASCAR F1. And then 6 months from now, make the NFL bet.